presentation. There we go. All right. Okay, we good? All right, so today's topic is going to be a little different conversation. Today's topic is going to be more about the new laws affecting real estate. There's going to be a lot of jargon today and a little bit dry material. So again, be patient with this, but it's going to talk about a lot of, diversify, fairness, discrimination, and things that are starting to develop, for the year for 2022. New forms that are implemented have been included as part of the listing agreement and also the purchase agreement. So what's new in real estate law? So let's dive right into it. So here are some of the significance that you'll see in the real estate law. Again, most of this stuff doesn't really pertain, but it's important that you at least have some understanding of it, which is the implications of bias training for licensees, appraisal discrimination disclosures, discriminatory restrictive covenants, fair housing and equal access, emotional support animals, use of prior surname, and then the partial list. Okay, so those are the things. That's AB 830, AB 468, AB 491, AB 1466, AB 948, and AB 263. There are many new laws affecting real estate in one way or another, almost 30. As a real estate practitioner, folks, you want to be aware of some of the significant new laws. Again, just last month, we had the new revised purchase agreement, and I'm constantly getting so many people calling me. They understand, and most of the information is similar to the past purchase agreement, but they have a lot of questions because there's a lot of new stuff added to the RPA. And they're saying, well, Simon, what does this entail? What does this mean? Why is there more contingencies released than the previous one? And that's, again, some of the common questions that I'm getting. And it goes even 10 years ago when there was a significant change into the RPA when they eliminated, the termite. The termite section 1 and section 2 was part of our purchase agreement. They completely removed that, and it was like every agent was asking 100 questions. Like, oh my gosh, this is so different than what I'm accustomed to. But after you do it more and more, it clicks and it resonates with you, and you'll get very familiar where you're just immediately wrapping up the purchase agreement in less than 5 minutes. So it is very, very interesting. Even for me right now, the purchase agreement is still like I have to kind of look at the manual and say, okay, so this is what I mean, because there's a lot of different language and verbiage that was included in the new purchase agreement. So the implicant of bias training. So this is one of the things that real estate brokers and salespersons will have to be doing this coming year. An applicant for a broker or salesperson license must take a course on fair housing and implication bias before sitting for the license exam. Okay, for license renewals, also the coursework is now added to the mandatory requirements. For sequential renewal, brokers and agents must take a 9-hour survey course as opposed to an 8-hour course under the current law. So they're going to add more stuff into your renewal. Every 4 years, as you're aware, you have to renew your real estate license, pay the Department of Real Estate their $245 if you have a salesperson, or $300 if you have a broker's license. On top of that, you have to do your continuing education prior to renewing your license. They will not renew your license until you show proof of the requirements, which in the past was 8 hours of curriculum. Now, on top of your 45, they're including an additional hour for a total of 9 hours of it. And that will start in effect January 1st of 2023. Okay, so guess what, ladies and gentlemen, you have 12 months before this requirement goes in full effect. Now let's talk about the appraisal discrimination disclosure. Requires that every real estate property purchase agreement containing notice stating that any appraisal of the property is required to be, unbiased, okay, objective, and not influenced by the inappropriate or illegal consideration. Now, this is where a lot of real estate agents are getting themselves in a sticky situation. And I want to be very crystal clear on the importance and how to navigate an appraisal issue, okay? Because again, what we're seeing is a lot of agents getting themselves in trouble. Notice includes contact information for filing a complaint if the buyer or seller believes that the appraisal is low based on such illegal considerations. Now, I've seen this firsthand, and ultimately, in order to do a thorough appraisal, you have to be licensed as an appraiser. But there's a lot of connections with real estate agents and brokerages that are going out there and doing these appraisals and charging ridiculous, but they're lowballing these appraisals for the benefit of the buyer. So you got to be very careful who you align yourself with. Okay. Now that will most likely be attached to the RPA sometime this year. Usually there's 2 updates every single year, in June and in December. So I have a feeling that we're going to see this new added information on the RPA about appraisals being added in June's updates. Okay. Notice is required beginning July 1st of 2022. So I'm telling you from personal experience, June is probably going to be, but it wouldn't surprise me if we get notice this month, March, April, May, as an update regarding appraisal. Discriminatory and restrictive covenants requires real estate brokers or agents or recorders, title companies, or even escrow companies who have actual knowledge of possible unlawful restrictive covenants in a declaration governing documents or deeds that is being directly delivered to a principal. Who is a principal in a transaction? Buyer or seller. To notify the owner or buyer of a covenant, and 2, the ability of the owner or buyer to have it removed through a restricted covenant modification process. 2, makes it easier to retract restricted language from homeowners by waiving fees, streamlining the recording process, and expanding who can file requests. Creates a program required each county recorder to establish a program to proactively retract unlawful restricted covenants. And that will come in effect as of July 1st of 2022. Now, I don't know all the ins and outs of this. This is fairly new to a lot of us through the California Association of Realtors. But I'm telling you, these are significant violations that can alter your position, monetary, and also possibly suspend your license if it gets escalated to the Department of Real Estate. So always do the right thing. Never take shortcuts. And if you don't know, ask questions. Speak with your broker, speak with your team leader, and navigate that. We have the resources, we have the attorneys, and we have the right people that can give you guidance and support to navigate, these new upcoming updates. Fair housing and equal access. In mixed income multifamily structures, okay, this is multifamily income producing properties, all occupants must have equal access to common entrance areas and amenities. As the occupant of market rate housing units already requires under general fair housing law, new laws act as a clarification. Now, again, a lot of this stuff is fairly new, but I'm just putting notice that in multifamily properties, you cannot say that a tenant cannot have access because they're in unit A or unit B or unit C or D. Let's say it's a 4-unit apartment complex with 4 families involved, and you only have limitation to one area, okay? And this is more focused, again, towards the seller, but if the seller does provide this information, we have to be fair in all practice and make sure that you caution in how you draft the information on the multiple listing to allow fair housing, equal access to any of the tenants that is multifamily, okay? And this is right now just multifamily. It doesn't really go into manufacturer, mobile homes, condominiums, townhomes, and single-family residence. One of the most talked about topic is emotional support animals, right? There's a big difference from emotional support animals and guiding dogs that, you know, have help the handicap or the blind, right? So some of the new updates goes into imposing restrictions on how healthcare practitioners may provide documentation relating to ESA, emotional support animals, requires documentation providers to include notice that the dog does not have special training required to be a guide, a signal, or a service dog, and requires a person that provides a certificate tagged vest, leash, harness for an emotional support dog to give notice to the purchaser that the material does not entitle an emotional support dog to have the right privileges afforded to a guide, a signal, or a service dog. Now, everyone knows the difference between guide, signal, and service, right? Service dogs are usually law enforcement dogs that serve the community, serve the county. These are what we call service dogs. These are active police dogs that deal with law enforcement in county police or even federal and state as well. Now, signal and guide dogs are basically for people that are handicapped, cannot see, need assistance to navigate in the neighborhood, in the communities, in the cities, or even within their home residence as well. The difference between an emotional support animal, it's more of an emotional, right? Psychological, where they need or maybe don't have family, excuse me, family, and they need like a pet. A pet to me is like a family, you know, and having the comfort of a family pet, you know, helps a lot of people deal with stress, anxiety, depression, and these emotional support dogs definitely help people. Now, there's a difference, excuse me, there's a big difference in these two categories and how that will align of the restrictions when it comes to renting out. Now, when it comes to purchasing, you know, you're a homeowner, it has nothing to do with the restrictions. But if you have a client that has a multi-unit, you know, if you're property managing, or your client is looking for a tenant and they have restrictions on there regarding the differences with a service dog and an emotional dog, this is where the new law will come in effect. And it's not just federal, it also includes the state statute as well. So it goes down and it says, does not change the underlying federal and state law regarding reasonable accommodations for support animals and in regarding to housing. So again, I have to caution you, be very careful if a client that has a multi-unit is asking for a tenant and how they approach that. If you do not know the difference between an emotional, do not come to conclusions, please reach out to the appropriate individual that can help you in understanding the differences. And ultimately, the decision of the landlord or the owner to make that decision to allow. Now, again, emotional is now somewhat considered like a service or guide or signal dog. And it's a very delicate situation that you've got to be very careful, because that applicant can definitely file a discrimination complaint against the landlord, the owner, the property manager, and more so the real estate agent that is facilitating the process as well. So be very, very careful in how you approach that. Some of the new laws and changes for 2022 is the use of prior surnames. A real estate license who is a natural person and who legally changed their surname in which their license was originally issued may continue to utilize their former surname for the purpose of conducting business associated with their license. So as long as both names are filed with the Department of Real Estate. Okay, so let's say it's more geared to women, ladies. You know, you're single, but you find that individual, charming person, and now you decide to marry and take on your husband's last name, but you still want to keep your maiden name. As long as the Department of Real Estate has both of your names registered with the Department of Real Estate, then you are within compliance. Okay.
So you're legally changing your last name to his, but you want to continue doing business as your name.
Exactly. You know, and we hear this quite often, you know, an agent that maybe was in a family real estate and they want to keep that name, but now the agent marries into a relationship, wants to use the husband's name, but still want to keep, you know, the known last name for many years because of opportunities, right? They may not know you as Katrina Smith, but they knew you as Katrina Johnson, you know, for the purpose of business. So as long as you file with the Department of Real Estate and they approve it, then you should be okay. Okay, any thoughts, questions so far? All right, let's continue. All right, so a lot of the information that I do get, it is part of the California Association of Realtors. And the cool thing is that you have the resources to navigate and get all the information. Now, this was just a tidbit. I know, as I said, it was going to be very dry material. But again, it's very important to understand that there's going to be some changes coming this year, and we want to make sure that we position ourselves and at least get the most updated information. Here's just an example right through the California Association of Realtors, the 22 new laws in effect, which is the Consumer Protection PACE and liens and seniors. You know, I'm not going to go too much into details, but here are some of the topics and description. Continuing education's implement bias training. This will apply on the January 1st of 2023. And here is all the information in the background that will relate to these new training requirements. And that's Bill 263. The Department of Real Estate changing language in the real estate from bureau to department. So existing law as of July 1st of 2018, if you were involved prior, it used to be called the Bureau of Real Estate, and now it's called the Department of Real Estate. Why they changed it from Bureau to Department of Real Estate was they wanted to save costs up in Sacramento. So they created this new division as the Bureau for the purpose of the consumers, what was it called? The consumers department, I think. And it was part of the consumers affair at the Bureau of Real Estate. It was a headache. If you were involved in that time and era, boy, oh boy, just to get any information, you had to go through so many channels just to get your specific question answered when you would call the Bureau of Real Estate. Now the department is a separate entity, has nothing to do with the business affairs or the internal affairs of the state. Now it's the department and that's it. They have hired more investigators since 2008. So please, 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 you know, even though they have provided you with your real estate license, they are not our friends. Okay, the Department of Real Estate is not our friends. As fast as they gave you a real estate license, well, maybe not as fast in the last couple of years, right? But as fast as they gave you your real estate license is how fast they can pull that license, suspend, revoke, and terminate your license. All right, their number one job is to make sure that you are in compliance, you're practicing ethical and doing the right thing, never taking any shortcuts. The last thing you want is to have the Department of Real Estate, you know, investigating you, and it's not fun, never fun. So I caution you that always do the right thing. But now again, it's the Department of Real Estate. We talked a little bit about the disclosure regarding the appraisal. Okay, here's a little bit of information regarding this new requirement on sales of real estate containing a notice, and that notice will probably happen in June. Added that language into the purchase agreement. Additional laws, including the following changes. Here's a little bit of information. So again, a lot of this stuff is all part of your member services. Escrow, there's a lot of things here that they're going to revise, modify, add, and take away on the new changes for 2022. Okay. Let me see another one. Home inspector, sewer laterals. Plumbers may both inspect and perform repairs, sewer laterals. A plumbing contractor may inspect a sewer lateral pipe connecting a residential and a business to a sewer system, and also offer to or perform repairs if the consumer is provided a specific disclosure before authorizing the home inspections. Okay, there's just a lot of stuff here that would be in effect. And going just back to the very top, and this is all the new information on the new laws. A lot of the stuff you probably will never see and will not recognize, but the stuff that I had on the presentation is really the pertinent stuff that you need, because it will relate to a lot of the stuff that we do on a regular basis. Okay, any questions regarding anything on the presentation slide?
This one Sagar is in Spanish language too.
Spanish language,
Because it will be helpful for the Spanish.
do you mean the presentation or
No, the laws.
I don't know if it's in Spanish. I don't think it is, but you can get an interpreter that can say it in Spanish, but I don't think this information is in Spanish right now. Okay. One of the biggest one is obviously the servicing dogs and the emotional dogs as well. And there's a lot of new stuff also happening up in Sacramento that we as real estate brokers are privileged to have, but it hasn't been open yet to all real estate professionals in the state of California.
So we don't know yet what those restrictions are going to be?
As of yet, no.
Okay.
Yeah, as we get closer to probably the summer in June, that's probably when we're going to start seeing really the ins and outs and all these different laws that are implicated into our business.
Simon, are they going to send the notices to the landlords of this multi homes?
I'm sorry, say that
the
again?
landlords of the multi homes, like, are they going to send them the new law so that they are aware of what the law it should be and when they
if they are working with a property manager or working with a real estate professional, this is going to be our responsibility to educate the consumer, the seller, the landlord on this. The owner is not going to be aware of all the implications and the new laws affecting multifamily. This is where we have to step in, but there's going to be forms that we're going to be providing the consumer. No difference than when we represent a buyer, obviously you want to be prepared with a buyer representation agreement, right?
Right,
To make sure you are securing your position, that, you have an agreement, and you have the agency disclosure as well, right? That locks in that opportunity that your responsibility is, to hold the utmost care and integrity of your client. Because I've seen this happen where an agent failed to provide an agency disclosure, went through the motions, and ultimately the seller ended up getting an attorney and not had to pay a commission because the listing agent did not provide an agency disclosure. It's very important. Anytime you're talking real estate, you must provide an agency disclosure as part of the requirements to get paid a compensation commission. So I know it's a lot of ins and outs on this. Again, I am learning as we go, and when we have our broker meetings with the state and the local association, they'll provide me with additional information. Again, this is part of the CAR legal tools. All of you have access to this information. Okay. Any additional questions that you may have regarding the new laws in 2020? Anything else you'd like to share with me, or any specific broker questions?
So the termite, as you said, the termite in the contract, it's out, like don't have to do termite. That's what you said?
No, what I said was 10 years ago when the purchase agreement, the RPA, the language on page 2 of the RPA had the specific language that said that, pest was included as part of section 1 and section 2. That has been removed. It's no longer on the RPA.
So it's not in the RPA then?
No, so now termite inspection is part of the request of repairs. So under RR, that information now as part of the request, if the buyer is doing their inspections, they hire a termite inspection, they go out and look and inspect the property, and then a report is given back. That report is going to say the findings of that inspection report, and ultimately it's the buyer's responsibility to request if they want a clearance, meaning if they want the seller to do the fumigation, tent the house, or they're buying the property as is. But that is now part of a request of repair under form RR. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Any other questions? Okay. Let me just do one more that I'd like to share real quick, and then we should conclude for the day. Bear with me, show my computer. Okay, so everyone is aware of the California Association of Realtors website, right?
Oh, yeah.
Now, the cool thing is that a lot of real estate agents, unfortunately, do not know all the cool stuff that the association has. Now, again, if you're not plugging in, right, if you are not getting engaged and involved in this, then you're not going to see all the tools that we have. The awesome part is this is where I go and get a lot of the information, okay? I'm not as smart as you think I am. Everything that I do is right from the information. I may have a little bit of, intelligence when it comes to understanding the dynamics, but again, where I go is through the California Association of Realtors. So you log in, I just want to kind of give you some insights in how you can approach and navigate. So where you see Transaction Center, you go to Risk Management, you click on Risk Management, and then here you can see the California Purchase Agreement. Here you can see COVID legal documents. Here you can see legal Q&A. Here you can see disclosure charts. Here you can see legal tools, legal live webinars, legal matter podcast, okay? And when you click on legal tools, this is where I get a lot of the information. I'm going to be talking next week on the appraisal contingencies the wrong way and the right way to do this. So it kind of backs into the conversation that we had of the new laws in place. But now we're going to talk a little bit more about how it can affect you as a buyer and you as a seller when representing either party. You represent the buyer and the contingency appraisal, right? And also the seller. Because if you know the new RPA, there's a new section, it's paragraph 3L8, I believe, of the new purchase agreement that says about contingency removal, contingency period to release that as a condition, but it also has where if the appraised value is anywhere different than the purchase agreement, what is the buyer willing to come in and pay the difference? And that's what's so cool of what we have now, that before we had to type it in. It's what we used to call either like an escalation clause, or that the buyer is willing to come in 5,000, 10,000, you know, based on the appraisal that the buyer will give, and anything that it exceeds that, the buyer has the right to cancel.
Okay.
For example, let's say that you make an offer for $1 million, right? And the appraised value comes in at 975. We have a discrepancy of $25,000. Now, in the past, if you had your appraisal contingency, the buyer can negotiate that and says, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, the appraised value came in at 975. You know, we made an offer of an offer of $1 million. Are you willing to go on the appraised value of 975? The seller can say yes, the seller can say no, or the seller says, look, meet me in the middle. Okay, and then the buyer can come in with the difference. The seller will reduce the price for the $1 million to make this stick and ultimately push to be able to continue. Or the seller has the right to say, no, you offered $1 million, we're going to stay at $1 million, you need to come in with the difference. So meaning that if the buyer really truly wants this property, on top of the down payment, the closing costs, and the $25,000 to make up the difference. Now, with that being said, I also want to tell you that if a buyer is putting a substantial down payment, then the ratios will not be an issue, meaning that the lender will say, yeah, you know what, there is a discrepancy, but because the buyer is putting a substantial down payment, their ratios, their front end ratios and their back end ratios still be within the guidelines, then the lender will still eat up the 25 cents. The only difference with that is that the buyer will have to finance that 25,000. So meaning that they're just going to include it as part of the finance. But let's just say that they're putting they're putting 50%, right? $1 million, 50% is what? 500,000. That's the amount that the buyer is putting as a down payment. Okay. So the buyer is technically financing 500,000, but because the appraisal came in at 975, right? Technically speaking, the lender will be financing not the 500, but the 495. No, 470. Okay. Wait.
They go higher.
They go higher, right?
Wait. So there's a $25,000. So the 500 that he would have been financed subtract 25,000, so that puts you at 475. So he's financing 475, right? Instead of 500,000. Did I confuse you?
Well, because he's not covering that. So you're saying he's still financing 475, and then the buyer has to come up with that additional 25.
Correct.
Yeah.
So what I mean is, traditionally, the less you put down, the likelihood that your ratios are not going to be in par. So the lender will only lend on the appraised value. And if the appraised value came in at 975, that's a $25,000 discrepancy, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm putting 50% down, I'm putting 500,000 and I'm financing 500,000. But because there's a $25,000 discrepancy, then ultimately the buyer would have to come in with that 25 for the difference. But because the buyer is putting a substantial down of 50%, the lender will see it as, we'll just eat it and put it into the loan. So the buyer will finance the full, and that would have to come out of pocket, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, the smaller down payment, the lender will not take that because their back-end ratios will be over 48%. Then the lender is going to say, no, the buyer has to come in with the difference, or you have to negotiate with the seller or cancel this deal. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, we're going to be talking about, appraisal contingencies, because this is the number one thing right now that we're seeing a lot of listing agents asking the buyer to release that immediately.
Mhm.
And by releasing the appraisal contingency immediately, you cannot use that as an avenue to back out of the deal because the appraisal did not come in. My biggest concern, what we're seeing a lot, and it's patches of different area, team, is that buyers are going 100, 125, 150 above asking. Now, this is why it's very important as a real estate professional when representing a buyer that you do your comps as well. Because you don't want to be in a position that you didn't do your homework and now you're exposing your buyer's deposit because you did not do a little bit of research, you didn't do your homework. So I want to caution you that do your homework, do your resource, and get into the multiple listing and check comps. That way you can you can educate your client. And at the end of the day, it's the buyer's responsibility, not. And if the buyer says, well, Simon, what would you do? Okay, you got to throw that back at the buyer. Well, Mr. Buyer, I'm not the one buying the property.
You're the one.
You are the one that's going to be responsible. You're going to live in the property. You're going to make the mortgage payment. You got to tell me where you're comfortable. I can only tell you based on the contract, the risk factors, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I am not buying. So I don't want to be put in that position, and be crystal clear with your client.
I think
Because you don't
that's,
want them to say, well, Simon told me, well, Simon said this,
Yeah.
and now negligence on our part, because that's the first thing when they lose money. Well, it was Simon's fault.
Yeah.
Okay, question.
do you find that tricky because they are looking to you to be the advisor?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But we're advisors on the process, not advisors of their financial risk position of risking their deposit, risking the opportunity to lose that property. That has to be on them. I don't want it to come back and reflect on me, because that's the first thing they're going to start. They're going to start pointing fingers. They're going to start blaming someone. And who do they blame? The real estate agent. So be neutral, and again, just throw it back on them.
Yeah.
And say, look, I'm not buying the property. I am not selling the property. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you got to tell me what you want. I can guide you. Here's the pros and cons. Here's the do's and don'ts. You tell me where you feel comfortable. And if you don't feel comfortable, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Peace of mind that I'm going to sleep okay at home, that I did the right thing. And then I did not jeopardize myself or put myself in a vulnerable position where now someone has potential claim against us. It's not fun. Okay. So I hope that kind of helps understand that you're going to get a lot of people asking you, well, what would you do, Serena? What would you do, Cheyenne? What would you do, Simon? Okay. Throw it back at them. Okay. Any thoughts, questions on that? Does that all make sense?
Yeah, it does. So you literally never say a number. Even if you have a number in your head, you're very careful to
No.
never say, once they give you their input, you never say, okay, that sounds good. I think maybe it should be this. Never.
Well, quarterback that a little bit more. Tell me more about that. So you're the buyer, or you're the seller?
Yeah, seller.
Okay, so let's role play a little bit.
Okay.
So what are you asking?
Okay, so I appreciate you bringing all the comps to the table. We've looked over that. You asked me where I think we should fall. The highest comp says $699, so I would love my property to go at $699. What do you think?
Okay, that's a very good question. Thank you, Cheyenne. So my position is to provide you with data. My expertise is to provide you with the resources in order for you to make a educational decision. At the end of the day, this is your property, and my goal and my number one responsibility is to give you the highest price with the least amount of headaches to net you the most possible. You know, we can come to a conclusion where you feel comfortable and I feel comfortable. I am not in the babysitting industry. My goal is to sell your home. Now, we do not dictate the price. The buyer is the ultimate decision. You know, we can put your property for $10 million. Does that mean it's going to sell? Probably not. But we want to be in the range that we at least get momentum and offers. If we're not getting offers, something is off. Price, the condition of the property, or something. So based on the trend, and this is why I do my homework, I look at 3 months, 6 months back. I look within a mile radius of your home. So I look for active, under contract, pending, and what has sold 3 months, 6 months back. And that will give me a good gauge on where we need to be. Again, every opinion of value is an opinion. If you get a licensed appraiser to go out there, or I get 2 or 3, guess what? They're going to give you 3 different opinions of value. They do the same thing we do. The only difference that they do is they are licensed and they get compensated for services rendered, and they measure the property. Now, they go on the multiple listing service, they go on Realist to get, you know, off-market recordings in the county recorders, but they do the same thing we do. They have the same resources that we have. But at the end of the day, it is your discretion. I'm going to advise you that, you know, I do not think we're going to sell it at that price based on the trend and the report and the data that I have. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
then would you, without saying an exact number, navigate them lower a little bit to go ahead and create this buzz around the property, right?
yeah, because it can go either way. Either way is, and I've seen this happen, okay? And I'm going to explain the 2 ways that this can happen. Well, Simon, you asked me to list a property based on your opinion, and you said to list a property for $1 million. Well, it's been sitting for now 3-4 weeks.
Yeah.
We haven't done any activity. You promised me, right, that we were going to get multiple offers, we're going to get a lot of showings. We haven't got anything. Who are they going to blame? They're going to blame you.
Right.
Now, let me flip it on you and say the same thing. My gosh, we got so many offers. Wow, 20 offers? Simon, you think maybe we priced it too low? You know, maybe I should wait because, you know, this is kind of rare. I have never seen that. And I've sold homes in the past, but to get 20 offers, I think we're really low. Well, maybe I should consider holding off on any offers or raising the listing price. And I've seen it that way too. So it's a balancing act, folks. It's a balancing. Again, you can provide all the necessary information, and the most important of everything is data, right? Black and white. This is what we have. This is the resource. We went on the multiple listing service. Data does not lie. Black and white doesn't lie. Okay, so you can navigate. It's like playing good cop, bad cop. This is what we have based on the square footage, apples to apples, right?
Yeah.
A house that is comparable to another house, square footage, amenities, bedrooms and bathrooms, lot size, year it was built, that's comparable. You cannot compare a 1950 to a 2022 new construction, even though they're in the same neighborhood, same street. Guess what? Even if it's the next door neighbor and you see a lot that happening in Manhattan Beach, Hermosa area where there's a lot of development, you cannot compare a 1950 to a 2022 new construction, even though it's in the same street. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's probably going to be land value compared to land value plus upgrades, new construction. It's like a car, right? Same car, but a car is 10 years old and a car is brand new. Cost is going to be a little different. Well, that's the same thing with real estate. So you got to understand trends, you got to understand data, and more so comparisons. You know, remember going to real estate school or taking any classes on how to evaluate homes, right?
Yeah.
And the number one thing they always say is you gotta compare properties that are identical or in similar characteristics. A house that is 3,000 square feet to a 1,200 square feet is not a comparable property. A lot size that is 15,000 lot to a 6,000 lot is not in comparison. So you gotta identify property in similar characteristics. You can always go from high down, meaning if the property has 4 bedrooms, you can do research and cons from 4, 3, and 2 bedrooms. But you cannot do 4 bedrooms to a 5-bedroom home because they have an extra bedroom. That's the same with bathrooms. The house has a 2-bedroom, 2 bath, and this house has a 2-bedroom, 3 bath, or a 2-bedroom, 1 bath. As long as it's less than that, you can use that as a comparable, but if it has more, then it's not a good comparable. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I go with the room and the square footage of the home.
That's correct.
Because usually it's when the 4 home, but the square footage less.
Right.
The rooms are small, you can tell. So
Right.
it's better to compare like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I hope that kind of gets you, and we're gonna have classes in how to evaluate comps. It's super fast, it's super efficient to do so as long as you know how to navigate that. And I'll probably end up having a class on how to do very effective CMAs, comparable market analysis, okay? We'll use the multiple listings, we'll use an example property, and then we'll kind of share that. And guess what? Maybe I can have a live, where we actually go to physically to a property, evaluate. Because again, when you're going on a listing appointment, just based on comps, still doesn't give you and tell the true story. Because seeing the property may say, yeah, this house needs a lot of work, we need to price it at this, or my gosh, this property is in mint condition, move-in ready, then you can obviously raise the price. That's why it's very important when you're going on an appointment that you physically see the property before you get any information. Now you can give a range, but then when you physically see the property, Mr. and Mrs. Senator, I think my opinion of value should be at this. Okay, very cool. Well, again, I'm right on time. It is 14:57 or 2:57 in the afternoon. I have military on my computer, but thank you again all for being on the call. Really, really appreciate you all. Thanks, and I'll see you on the next contract class. Oh my gosh! Hey, we will see you.
Hello.
What a surprise!
Hey, senor, how are you?
Wow,
Good.
how are you? Looking great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
How's everything?
All right.
Yeah.
Big picture.
Why do you look younger every time I see you? Instead of you're going back in time.
I wish. Put on some pounds and, it's,
I think all of us did. Me too.
yeah,
Me too.
who hasn't? So wow, you still have your contract spots?
Yeah, I just finished right now. We're just finishing.